Now we're only 1 minute early.
It
Yeah,
says
there we go.
preparing to live stream, and then I have to all right, and then live stream. There we go. Feel free to get started.
All right. Well, we're still, it looks like a minute early, so we're not going to launch full into the live stream, but we will start muttering amongst ourselves for those people who were keen to join and hit the button before we were even officially going. Uh,
Have you
so
ever been one of those people, Jay, that like has said first on a YouTube video just for your own satisfaction?
I don't say first, but I always check the comments and be like, I could have been first. Like
Mm,
I could have been there.
right.
That I don't compete against anybody except my past self. And I'm constantly winning that battle. So
Exactly. There we go. Nowhere to go but up.
hmm uh and it looks like we're at 1:30 now, so we can start rolling. I assume that we've got people joining. I'm used to doing this with Alex. And for those of you who are alarmed to see a couple of faces who aren't Alex, Alex is on vacation. And so we're doing our best to roll this forward without his expertise and charisma. And you'll be stuck with Karthik and myself for this webinar. And we've got Kate pressing the buttons and making everything go burr while we're doing that. So uh, have we got some people joining now?
It looks like it. I think we're starting to maybe get a couple of questions rolled through here from some of the early birds.
Perfect.
Um, yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, we got questions coming in already. There's one thing I wanted to touch on my side before we jumped into the questions. I wanted to let people know that the visual editor for the access control policy file is now in public beta. So you'll be able to go into the access controls tab of your admin console, click the visual editor, and start playing around with that. If you've been using Tailscale for a while, you will note that if you're using the ACL syntax, which is what we had been using for many years, if you make any changes using the visual editor, it will be switched over to the grants syntax, which is our new way of formatting things. They coexist just fine. Grants are extensible and allow us to give more fine-grained controls as well as add things in like via route filtering and uh, other things that are coming down the pipe as well. So one thing to keep in mind if you are using the visual editor and using ACL syntax is it will silently upgrade that to the new syntax. Uh, and well, favorite ice cream flavor's got to be Cherry Garcia. Like, uh, sorry, I'm jumping right into the questions because that is super important.
That one
Ben,
was critical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ben and Jerry's Cherry Garcia is like a 10, and the next runner-up is a 4. It is so good. How about you? Are you an ice cream guy?
I have a statement to make. I'm not a big ice cream guy. I love
Mhm,
gelato, and
mhm,
pistachio gelato in particular is
mhm.
my sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, my hometown up in Thunder Bay had a gelato place open, and they did a pistachio. It was so good. Now, I suppose we should answer a couple of questions about, Tailscale.
Hmm.
That's why they pay us. So, one question here, is there a way to opt out of the Tailscale logging on Android or macOS standalone? Um, and Karthik, I'm not sure if you know of the mechanism for that.
Yeah, so I can answer that for Mac OS for sure. There is a flag, I believe, called no logs, no support that opts you out of client logging. And this works if you're using the Tailscale D Mac OS, like the open source Tailscale D Mac OS variant. Um, I am not sure what it would be on like the App Store version, but there should be a way to pass the same flag like to the Tailscale D like daemon that runs on it. And in fact, the macOS client, if you don't have the CLI, there's a little menu item that you can use to install the CLI on your macOS, and then you can invoke this command. Please do note that um, Tailscale's ability to provide technical support when this flag is enabled goes down pretty rapidly because first of all we're collecting is kind of the metadata of your device and kind of IP information and things like that to be able to help you. That's one thing to note. And then the other thing is there are certain logs in terms of basically whether a device is successfully connected to control or not. Those aren't termed as client devices or client logs. We do get that information because we have to know if a device is connecting to us or not. We have to know if a device is connected to a derp server or not. And if we don't know that, then we don't know what to basically enforce on that device. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it looks like with the other macOS versions, you can run Tailscale set with the flag no logs, no support. There's a bunch of hyphens in there. I won't try and spell it out, but it is in our CLI knowledge base article. With the macOS versions, if you haven't installed the command line shortcut, you will have to use the full path to the Tailscale binary, which is under applications tailscale.app/content/macOS/tailscale with a capital T. So slightly different than on other platforms. If you have installed the shortcut, it puts a script in your path that basically it's not an alias, but behaves like an alias, and you can use Tailscale with a lowercase t as normal. As far as Android, I don't think there's a mechanism to trigger that on Android or iOS. Not that I'm aware of anyhow, but if we're wrong on that, we'll bring that up on our next webinar. We'll check in with our mobile development team and see if that is available or if that is forthcoming.
Yeah, I think for Android, the log entries are issued by like the com.tailscale.ipn package. I don't think there's a way to essentially like modify the logging bit there through a CLI command or through some other mechanism because it's not exposed in the client, but we'll get back to you on that. But at least you know where the logs are coming from now. So hopefully that at least helps until we find out. Yeah.
And we've got another question here. FortiGate is blocking the use of Tailscale at my workplace. Any way to bypass this? And this is, well, it is FortiGate doing it, but Tailscale was included on a list of remote access tools. And that list is something that FortiGate by default has turned on. So one of the early decisions that the Tailscale developers made was we're not going to try and obfuscate the fact that Tailscale is running. You know, we're super useful for a home lab tool. We are making our bread and butter as a corporate VPN replacement tool. And so we don't try and be sneaky about the fact that we're running. So the only way of going forward with that would be to let your administrator of the Fortinet know that this new default behavior is blocking access and ask them to disable that. We don't have a way of stealthily sneaking past. I don't know, Karthik, if you have any more context on that.
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's basically the SNI kind of blocking bit that is one of the biggest issues. I think, like Jay said, the solution in the future that we would look to would be some sort of a proxy that does not do SNI header checking or like rewrites it so that it doesn't identify itself as Tailscale to the FortiGate that is actually using that signature or that SNI to deny us, right? So yeah, it's something we're very acutely aware of. Jay and I were at an offsite and we were at a hotel that blocked us, and it was not a fun time.
Mhm.
So we were very acutely aware of the frustration there, and it is definitely a conversation that we have going with product on what we can do on that front.
And there are a couple of ways of blocking it. Like the hotel that Karthik and I stayed with in Toronto, it blocked the login.tailscale.com URL. So if you were already authenticated, everything worked fine. But when I tried to flip from my lab tailnet to the corporate tailnet, I had to tether to my phone to do that. Uh, this is different than actively looking for WireGuard traffic and blocking it on the wire. So if that is all you're running into, that's a quick way of making sure that you don't lose connectivity. Uh, Another question coming in about custom domain names for Tailscale Funnel. And the main reason we're not able to do that right now is we issue TLS certificates for your tailnets, something with scales, something with tails.ts.net domain name. And if it is your domain, we can't issue TLS certificates for that. So this is why it's not turned on. But the good news is Tailscale Funnel is not a really complicated thing to replicate in your own environment if that's something you're interested in. Before we launched Tailscale Funnel, I had I think, $6 a month virtual private service in DigitalOcean that was just running RINetD on a subdomain that I owned that would redirect to machines within my tailnet. And that is the same idea of what we're doing at scale with Tailscale Funnel. Uh, right.
Yeah. There was a question here, which was, what is Tailscale Android written in? And that's a good question. It's an open source Android client, and it seems to be written in Kotlin and, of course, Go. So I know nothing about the Android SDK components or anything really about coding in Android, but basically, you will need a Go runtime. You will need the Android SDK components, and I believe it's written in Kotlin or Kotlin. I still don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
so I see a question that came in here that is just UDP hole punching question mark. Uh, I'm going to need more context on that if you'd like me to dive into it. I don't know, Karthik, if you have intuited the meaning of that based on maybe something we've already discussed.
Um, I guess the answer is yes. Yes, we do. We do UDP hole punch. Thank you very much. Yeah, that is absolutely one of the mechanisms for us to do NAT traversal is uh, we are using stun as one of the mechanisms. The derp servers use stun as one of the mechanisms to do that. Now, um, I don't know how much we're privy to revealing something that may show up in the future that might make your life easier with relayed connections. And that is all I will say on the subject. It is UDP related. So,
Yeah.
take that little crumb for what you will. And I'm going to ask forgiveness from product if I wasn't supposed to actually even talk about this, but that's okay. The
Yeah,
things I
let's
do.
just say if you are currently in a restrictive environment and find yourself using derp servers a lot and would rather not, watch this space. I'm hoping in the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll be able to make a pretty exciting announcement there. Uh, so I like this question, so I'm going to jump right to it. Any plans for layer 7 policy controls? And not only plans, but it's already there, kinda. Obviously, Tailscale SSH is a type of layer 7 control in that we allow you to log into SSH as different users based on the policy that is defined for your tailnet. Also, uh, the grant syntax and is extensible in a way that you can write arbitrary layer 7 policies there so long as the service that you're connecting to is Tailscale aware. And that is a very small list, mostly of tools that we've written in-house. But if you think of our Tail SQL, it's a sandbox environment for querying SQL databases that ties into your tailnet. It is identity aware and tied into your Tailscale identity. And using grants, you can set what permissions somebody's able to inherit when they hit Tail SQL without them logging into it. So we have the framework there, and it is really up to the developers of what you're connecting to allow Tailscale to set those permissions on connection time. And Karthik, I know you work a lot with our Kubernetes operator. I imagine you've got some points to make there.
Yeah, so just to make like I guess doc searching easier, it's called Tailscale application capabilities. If you're trying to find the KB article for it, you can just go to the docs and look for like app capabilities or application capabilities. But essentially, there is an app map that you can add to a grant for certain things that are Tailscale aware, such as Kubernetes Tailscale operator. So some of the configuration options for that are, specifying an array of tags of devices to record sessions. So like to record your kubectl sessions, you can enforce a recorder that is an app capability for the grant that you are creating. So when somebody that is allowed through the grant to access yeah, the Kube API server through the Tailscale Kubernetes API server proxy through the operator, you can enforce kubectl session recording for them when they do a kubectl shell or kubectl debug pod or kubectl attach. That app capability is also what allows Tailscale identity to ultimately impersonate a cluster role in the cluster that has been set up. So for example, you can impersonate a particular cluster role with a group that only allows you to access certain namespaces, and we can enforce that through the Tailscale grant. So that is an example of the Kubernetes app capabilities. There are a few other applications that exist, such as GoLink, which is like an internal link shortening and management service that was written. That is another app capability that can be given access to for users with the service. And so custom capabilities is something, as Jay was saying, can be written for things like databases. I think is like a very popular ask. I don't think we've written one out for databases yet, but that is an example where um, a developer can use our Go library called TSNet, which lets you embed Tailscale in a Go application. Um, and you can use kind of like the local API that also exists for the Tailscale's underlying client, and you can build out your own app capability. And certainly there are customers that sort of are utilizing this to do it. It's very much a kind of draw the rest of the owl yourself situation because it depends on both the application you're trying to write a capability for and kind of the knowledge to just write in Go with the TSNet. That being said, um, we are very much invested in the ecosystem of app capabilities and layer 7. So yeah, watch this space. We definitely want to increase our library of what we can support there.
Mm-hmm. And I know that there are some tools that uh, some of our developers have budged together for their own use that we talked about internally recently and thought, the tools that we're bridging capabilities to are really popular. Maybe we should polish this and actually turn it into at least a community project, if not a full-blown Tailscale feature. So I think there's a little bit of momentum there that's going to really catch on. Uh, I've got one here. Any thoughts of implementing a native TSD proxy equivalent for Docker rather than having to set up sidecar containers? TSD proxy is, if you're not familiar, is one of those community projects unrelated to Tailscale. I don't know the developer, but it's brilliant. I use it on my own home lab. It makes setting up containers, especially when you're rapidly iterating, so fast and easy. you just add a line to your Docker config. It automatically sets up certificates, it registers it with Magic DNS, makes it available on your tailnet. We're not looking at replicating that functionality. What I would really love is to, uh, you know, make sure that as we go forward and expand Tailscale, that we don't break that project because I rely heavily on it. And so I think that sidecars are a fantastic way of doing a container. TSD proxy is a fantastic way of doing 30 containers. And there's definitely some space where we can sort of meet in the middle. And again, Karthik, you probably know more about services, which I think are going into beta now.
Hmm. Yeah, so services are I guess the closest analogy that I can make is it's basically a virtual IP that sits in front of multiple Tailscale machines and sort of is able to give you HA capabilities. Um, Now you can essentially onboard a service or kind of instantiate a Tailscale service that is front-ending, let's say, multiple like Nginx servers, and now you have HA where if one goes down, you're automatically, when you hit the service VIP, you will go to the kind of next one in the back end. And so this is kind of a service layer abstraction in front of the Tailscale like machine abstraction. So your service itself will have a 100 IP that you will always be able to kind of hit, and it's part of the tailnet that's routing to the backend Tailscale machines. Now, a really good use case of this is to spin up HA ingress proxies for Kubernetes or HA VIPs for like load balancer ingress services for Tailscale. So you can think of a few applications here where I might be hosting a web server or some application across like multiple clusters, and I have one VIP front ending, this service behind multiple clusters. So it's sort of like service federation, and combined with our regional routing feature, which is one of the paid Tailscale features, you will always route to the closest location of where the service is being hosted. So I could have US East, US West, and CA Central, let's say, um, all front ending like a web server service behind a Tailscale service IP. And then when I get my applications to hit that, they will automatically figure out which cluster they are closest to in terms of latency, and they will hit that. And then if that is unavailable, they will move on to kind of the next endpoint for the backend. And so there is kind of this deterministic behavior. We are very open to suggestions and enhancements on kind of making this kind of behavior a little more customizable. So like maybe implementing something like a round robin algorithm, or uh, generally when we look at load balancer type algorithms, this is like a ripe kind of space for that. Again, it's no surprise, like we know like Envoy is a really good example of a gateway that lets you do all this kind of traffic steering, and you know um yeah, we love Envoy, and that's the kind of behavior we want to like enable you guys to also have with Tailscale services, without like a full kind of service mesh deployment. So it's meant to be very quick and easy, solve the networking problem for you at layer 3 and at layer 7, that we can do with Ingress. So hopefully Gateway API pretty soon. I don't know when, but it's in the roadmap.
Nice. We've got a more in-depth one here, and I'm just want to sort of skim. We've got a couple of people have asked about interoperability with ISP's CGNAT address space. So for those who aren't aware, the 100.64/10 space that we use for your tailnet is a reserved IETF block that is normally used for carrier grade NAT. And if you have an ISP that gives you a CGNAT address, so you don't get a public IP address, and if your router doesn't net that away, like my internal network is 192.168.2. whatever, I don't know what my public IP address is. I don't need to know. in my case, it's not CGNet, but if it is, and if your router is using a CGNet internally as well, uh, there is a couple of steps that have to be done. And honestly, you may end up having to contact our support team. I'm not sure that we have a document on how to do this yet. But one of the people who wrote in about this asked about IP pools. And yes, you can use IP pools to not use that part of the CGNet space in your tailnet. But there's a manual step as well where under Linux, we use IP tables to drop CGNAT traffic from any interface that isn't Tailscale. And we've done that to avoid routing loops or misrouting. In this one particular edge case, that's going to interfere with your traffic. So if you're familiar enough with IP tables or NF tables to know what to do when I say take away that drop rule, then you're off to the races. And if you're not, you should contact our support team. I know that they have some internal documentation on the steps required to make that change. And I'm going to take it as a takeaway that we should probably have that in a public doc as well. And I don't believe we do right now.
Yeah, that's pretty bang on. I think one of the things also that I think would be good in that document would be to talk about like the different like net filter like options that we do where it's like, okay, we will configure all of our rules in the order that we need to get your device to work versus the other rule where it's like we can let you append things to the rules, but like you will have to take care of the IP tables rules yourself. And then there's the one where it's like we're not going to touch your IP tables, and if you want to get Tailscale to work, you have to add every single IP tables rules. You crazy person. So I think that would be a good like document as a companion to this and some of the different ways you can decide on how you want to drop or modify that rule.
Mhm.
But I do agree ultimately there could be also something we might be able to do in the future on maybe detecting if an IP pool is being used and then like reconfiguring the IP tables rules automatically to only drop the uh, the segments of the CIDRs which are not in the IP pool, essentially, right? Like, and if we could maybe automate that away in the future, I think that would be like a nice little stretch goal as a feature request.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, we do have somebody asking about roadmap, and I love talking about our roadmaps. I talk about our roadmaps a lot when I'm on customer calls. Karthik and I spend a lot of our days talking to new customers. Uh, I'm not going to dive into it right now, partly because there are certain parts of our roadmap that are sort of open to the public and certain parts of the roadmap that are still behind an NDA because we haven't fully committed or because we're not quite sure on a timeline. And I don't remember which is which, but I think it would be a great future webinar idea to have a list that is curated by our product team of things that are ready enough that we should be allowed to talk about it in the future tense. So, we were hinting earlier at some upcoming features. I'd love to dive into those, even though they're not ready yet. But it's something that I think we need to take advice from our product team before we go live with it, so I don't step on anybody's toes.
Um, there are a couple of questions in terms of like tail scale on certain platforms. So I guess I'll just kind of group a couple of those as one. So the first one was, how about Tailscale for a standalone XR VR platform like Meta's Horizon OS or Apple's Vision OS? And then the other one that's in the same kind of sphere is, I just bought a PCIe Nano KVM that has Tailscale and it was running a pretty old version of Tailscale. Does it get current Tailscale updates now? So uh, we make a best effort to publish the binaries and packages for wherever it is that we can sort of publish them. So like anything in the sort of Linux sphere of things, and just tossing out the packages and the binaries for you to use anywhere, and the deb and the .deb packages and all of that good stuff, we publish, right? And then we try with best effort. Um, we have like a Linux script that will try to detect your OS and try to install Tailscale with the package manager that it detects on that OS and all of that. Some environments are locked down. So good examples of this is FreeBSD or vendors that use FreeBSD and lock it down even further. Cough cough pfSense and OpenSense. Um, Someone like the Nano KVM, I don't know what they're running, what flavor of Linux they're running, but maybe they've locked the package manager or the method of kind of getting packages there as well.
Mhm.
So in general, and then of course I don't know what the Apple and the Meta kind of VR headsets are running for the stack, but in general, what we would encourage you to do is to talk to your vendors and say, hey, uh, we love Tailscale. They provide us with binaries. Like, is there a way that you could get those packages in? Now, certain community members have taken it upon themselves to maintain like packages for specific things. So I think for OpenSense, there is a community GitHub repo that is very diligent about making sure that they are publishing the latest Tailscale packages as soon as we publish them. So again, that's up to the community who's able to kind of do stuff like that. I think once we kind of have an idea of being able to dedicate a little bit more bandwidth to maintaining like some of these other more, you know, rarer kind of environments, we might be able to provide a little bit better support. But for example, like we're already making efforts to make sure that the FreeBSD packages, at least like for the OS itself, are up to date. Now, is the OpenSense maintainer gonna take them and kind of update it for the OpenSense like plugins architect like environment there in OpenSense? Yes. Will they do the same for pfSense? No, that's up to the package maintainer. So I think just a very, long story short, we do our best to make sure that for all distros we have the packages available, but some of these environments that use kind of these lockdown package managers or systems, it's really up to the community or to the vendors to do it. So go ask your vendors.
And also, like, I've had really amazing success on anything I can get a shell on. Like, I've got a Kobo e-reader. I hooked up a USB cable, did a serial shell into it, and was able to just grab the Tailscale statically compiled binaries for that CPU, and it just worked. Like, there's a lot of environments where if you're cool getting a root shell, grabbing the binaries and running them, it might just work. And we do have some people on a team within Tailscale now, which is super exciting, whose job it is to work with other companies on integrations. And I'm helping out with one of those projects now. It's not at a point where we can go into depth, but we've had a couple of like network hardware vendors, for instance, who want to have Tailscale be natively integrated the way that you can do it yourself with pfSense, with OpenSense, with OpenWRT, that sort of thing. So again, watch this space. There's going to be some fun things happening over the next several months. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. In the interest of just what we talked about, there's a pfSense question where they said it seems to limit clients behind it to derp, no direct connections. What options do I have to encourage more direct connections from clients to Tailscale? We have a document around this. The problem is that you are not able to basically get a easy NAT with like a static NAT port mapping per connection very easily on pfSense. I believe there is a way in the UI to do a static NAT mapping for connections bound to Tailscale. We have the instructions to do it. Once you do that, you should be able to get direct connections because now you're essentially turning your pfSense NAT implementation from a hard NAT to an easy NAT, which can do stun and get the port that it needs to connect to, therefore getting you a direct connection. Please note though that this is still like going to be an easy NAT, which means that if your other device is still going to be a hard NAT, it doesn't matter that your pfSense has an easy NAT. The only way to kind of, get a direct connection when one side is a hard NAT is to have a no NAT on the other side. And pfSense isn't able to basically sort of do a no NAT or like what they call a static NAT. So like a full cone NAT, I think is the traditional term for it. So it's not able to do a full cone NAT. So that's again a security feature of pfSense and OpenSense. So
But is
yeah.
also something that is going to be really helped out with this new uh, feature that will be coming out soon that we alluded to earlier around avoiding relayed connections.
Mhm.
And yeah, watch this space. Uh, had somebody asked about if their workplace adopts Tailscale. Love it. This is how our free plan stays free is when you mention to your employers that you use a much nicer to use system at home than you do at work. Uh, but the question is, am I still going to be able to connect to my own tailnet? And the answer is almost certainly yes. There are some restrictions on corporate-owned devices that can be set. So if I am an administrator for an organization and have an MDM installed on a laptop or a phone, I can restrict which tailnets that device can log into because we assume if you've got an MDM on that device, it's your device. You have full control over it. The only real caveat when using multiple tailnets is you don't connect to both of them at once. Like I've got about a dozen tailnets. Due to the nature of my job, I've got sandboxes all over the place, as well as our production testing environment, my home lab, and our corporate tailnet. And I can connect to any one of them using the Tailscale switch command on the command line. I use Linux on my desktop, so that I do that through the command line. Although we have a Systray app now that just came out. If that's something you're interested in, on my Android, I can just click on my user icon and flip between uh, those different tailnets. So yes, you should be able to still use it, but you won't be connected to both at the same time. Right. Who else have we got here? Somebody asking why I don't share a blog about my home lab setup, because it never stays the same long enough for me to finish a blog post. I type very slowly. Uh, but we do have some great bloggers in the company. Of course, Avery, our CEO, is quite a prolific writer and has written some very opinionated, spicy takes about many technical subjects. So if you look him up, his blog is great. Lee Briggs, who has done many of these webinars, also does frequent blogging on tech subjects.
Yeah, there's a question which was, what is the best way to provision Tailscale on a VM remotely? Example via Ansible or any declarative approach. We have a Terraform provider that you should kind of fulfill that need. I would suggest using Cloud Init to, along with the Terraform, to make sure that the Tailscale client can install on your VM. So Cloud Init is pretty ubiquitous, and it can download the client, install any kind of other scripts or um, things that you might want to do, such as kind of optimizing for UDP GRO for like better subnet routing bandwidth and capability on the kernel. So yeah, Cloud Init is your answer, and Terraform is your answer for the Tailscale piece of that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And if you prefer Pulumi, we've got a provider for Pulumi as well. And we do have customers who are using Puppet and Chef, Ansible, any of these automation tools. The only part of it that would be different among all these platforms is how you manage those secrets. And if it's like a one-off where you're like actually pasting an auth key into a local script and hopefully not checking that into Git, then that works. But many of these tools also have secrets managers that we try and interoperate with. Uh, Had a question about interoperability with Headscale for hybrid or disconnected deployments. And, you know, uh, I love Headscale. I have one spun up that I like to play around with. It is a fantastic tool. We work closely with the Headscale maintainers to make sure that any uh, client work that we do maintains compatibility with Headscale, because while that is not an official Tailscale product, it is close enough to it that we ended up hiring one of the two primary developers of Headscale, and we coordinate with them to make sure that nothing breaks. So Headscale is, endorsed, if not recommended. It is unofficial, but everybody here thinks it's pretty darn cool. And it was actually written completely independently. They reverse engineered the open source client and said, for each of these calls, this is what a server would have to do. And they were able to figure all of that out. And that's just like galaxy brain stuff. I love it. For hybrid use, again, with fast user switching using Tailscale Switch or using the GUI, you can flip between Headscale and Tailscale environments pretty seamlessly. But again, you can't connect to both at the same time. Okay.
Um, I guess there was a question that I actually would be interested in the answer to as well. Um, but it has to do with subnet routers and ACL's behavior. So when a subnet router advertises a slash 24, but an ACL allows just one IP, the full slash 24 route still installs in the subnet router. I guess the question was any plans for route tables to only reflect ACL permitted IPs or subnets is one question, but the other one I think to answer is that the user shouldn't actually have any access to anything that the ACL doesn't permit. So
Mhm.
having that route in the OS shouldn't really affect anything other than, of course, routing you through Tailscale to that to the rest of that, trying to route you through Tailscale to the rest of that subnet, rather than using the local route there
Mhm.
for your local interface.
So I don't know if there's any plans to specify the route tables, because these two parts of this operation are happening in different parts of our infrastructure. But yeah, even though the route is there, the subnet router will drop any connections if there is no policy permitting it. We have a question about the serve.json configuration. And this is something that I ran into as well when I was playing around with it. I ended up, if you set up serve as per the docs, you can export the configuration as a JSON file. And that's what I did, and keep a copy of that in one of my very many notepads scattered around my desktops. And basically edit that. But you're right, that is something that should probably be in our documentation on Tailscale Serve. And I will open a ticket about that right after this call. These we're slowing down a little bit because the questions are rolling in real hot and fast right now, and we're running low on time. So I I want to high grade them for the next 15 minutes to try and pick the ones that are most broadly applicable.
Lightning round?
Yeah, let's do
Lightning
it.
round. My router is on Tailscale 1.6. How critical is it to update it? Please do. There's been a lot of fixes since Tailscale 1.6, both in terms of performance and DNS and routing. Um, you might be pulling your hair out one day on an issue that got fixed like a year or something ago. So please do that if you can. Um, Next question. Is it possible to choose a Tailscale IP in a different country? So I think you might be talking about like exit nodes, like the Tailscale CGNAT IP isn't really kind of tied to geolocation. So If you want to self-host your own exit node, you can put that anywhere, and this Tailscale CGNAT IP is just an IP. It'll work there.
Mhm.
If you want to use Tailscale with our Mulvad add-on as an exit node, they provide you with a wide range of exit nodes in multiple countries, and so you can feel free to kind of use that as the exit node. So
All
I
right.
don't know if there's a different interpretation of that question, Jay.
No, that's how I picked it up as well. And related to that, there was a question about NordVPN and if we're going to integrate the way that we did with Mulvad. I don't believe there's any conversation about that right now. But one thing to keep in mind is if you already have a Mulvad subscription, you can't move that over to Tailscale. You have to subscribe to Mulvad from Tailscale to use the Mulvad extension within Tailscale. Uh, Next question is, I'm not sure when to use an auth key and when to use an OAuth client. I use OAuth clients whenever I have a secrets manager I can lock something into and never think about again. They don't expire. They can generate auth keys on the fly, which do expire normally, but the longest live auth key you're going to get out of the Tailscale API or web UI is 90 days. So if you're building a CI/CD pipeline and you don't want to go in and change credentials every 90 days, the OAuth client is the way to go. If you're doing, local Docker development, if you're doing local machines, auth keys are a lot quicker to work with.
Yeah, a good example is let's say you have like an auto scaling group of subnet routers that you kind of reboot or scale them down, scale them back up. You want to have a way to instantiate them quickly and securely. So that would be like a good example of an OAuth client that is being called by Terraform or whatever orchestration is handling that. So it will mint an auth key each time on its own by calling the Tailscale API for that particular invocation. And so it's really good for like the automation workflows is to have an OAuth client and secret that you can store in a secrets manager. And if you want, rotate in the future, that would be the recommended way to also kind of leverage that with the Terraform provider.
And pro tip that I don't know if it's documented anywhere, you can use the OAuth client secret as the argument to TS key in Tailscale up. So you don't have to go through the process of generating an auth key with it. It's not how it's intended to be held, but for local development, that's what I do more often than not. So I've
Yeah,
got
it's in the
a
doc. That
okay,
Tailscale up command is in the doc with the pre-authorized and ephemeral and like all the flags that you can pass into it. It's in the docs.
perfect. Uh, Can two devices be subnet routers for the same LAN at the same time? Kind of. If you advertise the exact same CIDR on two subnet routers, no matter where they are on your tailnet, they will go into an active passive HA, where the first one to connect to our control server will handle all of the traffic until it becomes available. Then the other one will take over and handle all of the traffic. Uh, if you're advertising more specific routes, then that will route normally. So if you have like a /32 because you've paired subnet router up with a single host, that will be normal. If you turn on regional routing, which is a feature in some of our plans, instead of going active passive, subnet routers that are in the same region will do round robin load balancing. And subnet routers that are not in the same region, so they're connected to different DERP servers, you will be routed to whichever one is most optimal within some abstract, fuzzy definition of most optimal.
So latency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is specifically latency to the home DERP server
Correct.
uh, of the subnet router,
Subnet
not
router.
necessarily latency direct to the subnet router.
Yep.
Uh, do you know, Karthik, what an NDI feed is?
I don't know what NDI stands for. Like I know
Me neither, but I have a suspicion of what this question's about anyway. So
okay.
I was hoping that you know more than I, but somebody asked what's preventing me from viewing NDI feeds while I'm on Tailscale. I have an Apple TV set up with subnet routing. I expect that it is something that uses multicast, and multicast works over LAN. It does not traverse Tailscale. Uh, I'm kind of spitballing there because this is kind of the same shape as a very common question that we get around things like, can I discover a printer over Tailscale? No, but you can print to it if you know its IP address. So, oh, NDI is video over IP. Thank you. And yeah, I would expect that that comes down to multicast or MDNS.
I think there was also an MDNS question about Apple TV. So when I activate my connection to Apple TV, is it possible to isolate local MDNS traffic when routing through a subnet router? I guess we just don't really deal with MDNS traffic, correct? Like
It doesn't
we
get
don't,
forwarded at all.
yeah.
Uh, in very small applications, there are layer 2 proxies that you can spin up that will forward MDNS over UDP. This does not scale, so be careful if you're doing it. But if you absolutely need an MDNS response for, a licensing server or something, that uh, layer 2 proxy is where you would start digging for that. And here's a fun one. Favorite part of working for Tailscale and most interesting use of Tailscale you've seen. I mean, I get to work with some of the most galaxy brain nerds I've ever met. I come from a background where I've been the IT guy in other industries, and this is my first time really working for a tech company. And just the level of expertise of the people I work with is unreal, and I love it. I learn so much every day. I feel like I'm going back to school. And the most interesting use of Tailscale I've seen, I'm not going to go into too much detail because there is an NDA in place, and if I get too specific, there's very few companies that operate in that arena. But you know, there's Tailscale running on submarines. There's Tailscale running on submersible drones, on aerial drones, on self-driving cars. Like there is so many people using Tailscale for really neat stuff. And I love hearing about it every day. And Karthik and I get to be part of those early conversations because we get to work with our customers who are just starting to use Tailscale more often than not. I don't know. What's your favorite use case that you've come across recently, Karthik?
Can I say robots?
Yeah, surprising number of robots.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and yeah, I don't know off the top of my head which of our customers were permitted to talk about publicly, but surprising number of robot companies. And of course, almost all of the AI companies that I can think of at some point. Uh, and that's kind of neat just being part of this big groundswell. I don't use LLMs for anything myself, but I think that over the next few years, there's going to be some interesting use cases coming out of that. And I'm excited that we're going to be part of that.
Yeah, there's another question that I'll try to answer. It says, is it bad to have Tailscale on if the device is already in a shared subnet? I don't know if they're asking if a device is in the actual network that is being advertised.
Mhm.
No, it's not bad in the sense that because the Tailscale subnet route will take priority over the local route, you will be using the route to the subnet router to kind of access that device. So like it may be a little bit slower than just going through the regular LAN. So um, if you want to turn Tailscale off so that you just access it through the regular LAN, that's fine. But most of the time, the difference in latency is so slight that you might not even notice it. Tailscale is
Mhm.
meant to be an always on VPN, but yeah, there's nothing stopping you from turning that off.
Okay, I got somebody asking, using Tailscale to play LAN games, the game servers can only scan 192.168/16. Is there a way to set node IPs to use that range? No, but you can use a subnet router and advertise that range. And rather than putting Tailscale directly on the server, and if it's doing an active scan, that should work. again, if it's trying to use MDNS or multicast to find those, it's not going to work without that layer 2 proxy that I mentioned before. Mobile subnet routing, when will it be available? About 3 months ago, I think. We can use Android as a subnet router now. I've done it myself. I don't have an iPhone, so I don't know if we can do it on iOS right now, but we tend to keep those two trees running relatively parallel to each other. So I imagine if not, then either it's going to be very soon, or there is something about the iOS sandbox that prevents it. All right. Uh,
Um, MCP server and Tailscale, how do they go together? This is a topic I will have to admit I don't know much about, but what I will say is that instead of trying to solve the auth problem between MCP, between a client and an MCP server at layer 7 or OAuth or other layers, it is pretty awesome to solve it at the network layer. So Tailscale is a very good use case for this. Now, our director of solutions engineering, Lee, who has been on a few of these, wrote his own kind of implementation for an app capability to kind of connect to his MCP server that can look around his tailnet and tell him things about it, about the devices, about like anything that is accessible through the Tailscale API. So the connection between the client and the server is absolutely a really good use case for securing that through Tailscale. Um, there is potentially stuff in the future that we might reveal around something officially in the product. So
mhm.
watch this space.
We do have somebody on our product team who I believe just today was officially made product manager for all things MCP. So that goes to show we're not that big of a company, how much attention we're paying to that space. Because I think that's one of those things where a lot of cool stuff could be happening at any moment. See, Tailscale for QNAP is not able to do subnet routing, and I believe that is a limitation of the platform. It is the same with I have, it's not a QNAP, it's the other kind of NAS that I've had for years and just can't remember the name.
Synology?
It's a Synology. Thank you. Uh, and out of the box, Tailscale can't be a subnet router on Synology. You can go in and install it as root, and then you are able to work outside of that sandbox. That being said, a small Raspberry Pi can be a sufficient subnet router for a home network, or something like an Apple TV, which is probably going to be on all the time anyhow.
Yeah, I think there's a whole this tangent. There's a bunch of kind of small form factor NAS devices that allow you to just like run your own OS on them. So for me, that's like the best of both worlds. I get the hardware in that kind of small form factor NAS to like fit 4 or 5 drives in, but I'm not limited to their kind of OS and licensing. I can just decide to chuck Ubuntu or Debian or whatever I want on the actual um, NAS there. So.
And we have a long stack of questions that we were not able to get to, and we have just 2 minutes left. So, Karthik, if there's any of these questions that are burning a hole in your pocket and you really want to squeeze them in, I'll let you do a quick scan there. But
Yeah, how is SMB or NFS over Tailscale? Any recommendations? Well, SMB was not built for high latency links, so 10 to 20 milliseconds may be enough to mess you up. If you're trying to do SMB across Tailscale, I would definitely recommend WebDAV over SMB. I would recommend NFS over SMB. Just
yes.
SMB does not play well with high latency links, and that is true whether you are using Tailscale, WireGuard, OpenVPN, whatever. It just does not like latency. It was not
Mhm.
built for that. It's like pretty old protocol.
And speaking of old protocols, NFS works very well if it is the modern NFS. If you're trying to use
V4,
NFS
I believe.
1, it's going to behave much like
Yeah, yeah.
SMB for most of the same reasons. But Tailscale has a built-in WebDave server. and you should definitely check that out. I use it internally for just about everything. It's fantastic.
I have one that I always love to answer that I never get outside of this
Mhm.
context. What hardware powers your own home labs? So
Oh.
I have for my networking, I'm going to be switching to MikroTik, but right now I'm just running OpenSense on some random N100 Intel little kind of box.
Mhm.
Um, the switches right now are Unify, and as far as the compute goes, these are MS. I have three MSO1s in a cluster, in a Kubernetes cluster with TalOS, and trying to do Ceph Thunderbolt ring networking. But yeah, I try to basically run a TalOS production level Kubernetes cluster at home. That's the level of masochism that I have subscribed to in my life.
Nice. I have slowly been replacing all of my networking gear with Eero, which I've been having a lot of fun with lately. And I just have a System 76 machine that is just so bizarrely overspec'd uh, because I'm usually running 20 or 30 Docker containers on it, and it just runs all the time. Got my Synology out in my garage with a Ethernet cable running out to it, but I'm I guess we are at time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, just wanted to mention that our next session is going to be on the 27th of August at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a very special session because, of course, Alex will be back, but we will have Sam, who shout out for Sam, who just became our interim head of product. So for everyone that was itching to ask those roadmap questions, that's your time. So yeah. Thank you
All right.
for your time, and everyone have a great day.